morning I'm off to the Queensland Museum to see Mephisto. If you know anything about Mephisto, she is the last of the German A7V program, the first tanks the Germans built late in the First World War. So there's a lot to tell you about Mephisto if you don't know, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm on my way down to see Mephisto because an artefact has recently emerged, and it's been missing for well over 100 years. Anyway, so there's a new display and we're going down to have a look at it and visit Mephisto again. But let's get on to the history of the A7V program. Let's do a quick visit, have a look at that, and then hopefully you'll join me for a visit to Queensland Museum. Let's go! In response to the acknowledged threat of the British tanks arriving on the battlefield in Western Europe on 16 September 2016, the Imperial German War Ministry decided to commence a program to build Germany's first tanks. Initial designs focused on up-armouring existing all-terrain vehicles, but this was quickly shelved in order to move to a purpose-built vehicle. The capture of a British Mark II tank in April of 1917 certainly provided the Germans with a working vehicle in which they could quickly learn much about tank design. By mid-1917, a final design was approved, the A7V. It was a complex vehicle that involved 16 different companies in its construction. Numerous technical problems needed to be resolved, including finding a suitable track system, as none was commercially available in Germany at that time. Due to the A7V's reliance on using the Holt tractor chassis, it had exceptionally low ground clearance and was susceptible to fouling by wire, mud, and other debris. The development of Germany's first tanks was also severely hindered due to the Allied blockade of German ports during the war. Germany had to rely on its own industry and resources, and the lack of armour plate production was a major concern. Although there were up to 100 chassis available at the commencement of the program, the initial production order was restricted to a mere 20 machines, which made it virtually impossible for the Germans to field an effective tank force in any meaningful numbers. This led to the development and production of two sub-variants: the Überlandwagen, used for the transportation of stores and ammunition, and the Flakpanzer, which mounted two anti-aircraft guns. A7V production was split into two orders, 10 from the firm Röchling and 10 from Krupp. The first group of tanks, chassis numbers 501, 505, 506, which would become Mephisto, 507 and 540, received Röchling armour plate. The other five vehicles were chassis numbers 503, 504, 541, 542 and 543, received Krupp armour plate. The final 10 vehicles appear to receive Röchling armour plate and were produced in very late 1917. The first A7Vs rolled out of the Daimler plant near Berlin in October of 1917. Generally, the A7V had a crew of 18 and included a commander, driver, mechanics, reserve drivers, 3 gunners for operating the 57mm main gun, 12 machine gunners, a signaller, as well as runners who had the dangerous job of running between vehicles to pass messages. All the crew were volunteers. Mephisto took part in the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux on the 24th of April 1918. During the attack for Monument Farm, Mephisto, along with supporting infantry, captured 175 British soldiers. Whilst moving through an apple orchard, she dropped a track into a fresh shell crater and slipped sideways into the massive hole. Staying upright, she was stuck in place. Once it was clear the vehicle was immobilised, Mephisto was abandoned by her crew. Under heavy fire, they managed to remove personal weapons and any other critical equipment, including the machine guns. On the night of 24-25 April, a German demolition party set charges and caused substantial damage to the interior and front of the engines. Mephisto lay abandoned in no man's land for 3 months. On July 13, men of the Australian 26th Battalion from Queensland moved into positions 1.5 kilometres east of the tank. On the night of July 17, the battalion pushed past the Allied front line and moved it beyond Mephisto's position, thus creating an opportunity to recover the tank. The recovery effort occurred on the night of July 22-23, and despite the Germans using a heavy gas attack in an effort to stop the Australian infantry and British gun carrier company, they were successful in recovering the tank. Once recovered, Mephisto became an object of intense scrutiny. She was eventually moved to Dunkirk, then shipped to London, and finally on to Brisbane, Australia as a war trophy of the 26th Battalion. On the 2nd of June 1919, she arrived at the docks in Brisbane and was moved to her display position at Queensland Museum. She stayed there until 1986, when she and millions of other objects were moved to a new purpose-built facility at the Queensland Cultural Centre at South Brisbane. Mephisto spent 2 years, between 2015 and 2017, at the Australian War Memorial as part of the centenary commemorations for the First World War. She is now in her new home at the Anzac Legacy Gallery at Queensland Museum, South Brisbane. Now we can get on to the purpose of today's road trip. So last year, a very important piece of Mephisto, which had been missing since 1919, was reunited with her. Just a couple of weeks ago, a new display was opened featuring this unique object, Mephisto's original compass. Now, such a compass is a very rare object, as it's built for working within the confines of what is essentially a metal box, that being the tank itself. So, let's go and visit Mephisto.